Now, our first presenter is Dr. Keesler. In order to plan and implement any public health program, the first step is to assess the baseline for the community's needs and perceptions about the problem that is going to be addressed through any program. Dr. Keesler has done an excellent job in assessing the community attitudes and experiences regarding mental health and substance use disorder in Lawrence County. Now, Dr. Keesler is an associate professor at the School of Social Work out of IU Bloomington, and he's also a Lawrence County resident. And without further ado, we will go to the presentation by Dr. Keesler for his work.
Hello, my name is John Keesler. I'm an assistant professor at Indiana University School of Social Work on the Bloomington campus. Throughout this presentation, I will explore with you the attitudes and experiences surrounding mental health and substance use in Lawrence County. Rural areas like Lawrence County often face considerable challenges, including but not limited to fewer employment opportunities than urban areas, poverty and economic hardship, health disparities, and a lack of community supports. As such, they can be prone to higher rates of mental illness and substance use disorders, as well as other health challenges. With a frequent lack of providers and the influence of things like stigma and shame, particularly associated with help-seeking behavior around mental illness and substance use, many people oftentimes go without professional help and struggle for long periods of time. In 2017, Indiana University on the Bloomington campus launched a community university partnership initiative called Sustaining Hoosier Communities. In its first year, IU partnered with Lawrence County to help community leaders with any projects or challenges that they may have had. About 30 projects were identified and then shared with IU faculty. Faculty were then encouraged to take on a project that would complement one or more of the courses they were teaching so that students could get involved. Given that I was teaching a research course in the graduate social work program that focuses on mental health and addictions, one particular project stood out. And that was one of the ones identified by Sheriff Mike Branham, the sheriff for Lawrence County. He had requested that a community-wide survey be done to assess citizens' attitudes and experiences surrounding mental health issues as well as substance use. After having had an initial meeting with Sheriff Branham to better understand what was needed, it was clear to me that this survey needed to be guided by what the community leaders were most interested in knowing. In other words, this survey really needed to be community specific. In order to accomplish this task, the sheriff helped to arrange meetings with various community stakeholders, including the chief of police, the mayor, judges, community members, and folks within the social service and mental health sectors. The meetings or interviews were guided by a single open-ended question. What would be helpful for you to know about the community regarding mental health and substance use? After having spoken with a dozen people, I identified themes in the notes that I had taken during the meetings. These themes then became the foundation for the individual items that were developed for the community survey. My students and I worked on developing the survey during the fall semester. I shared the survey with the community leaders to get their feedback and make any changes. The survey was then rolled out to the community in late winter and early spring of 2018. Paper copies were available to the community at various locations like the jail, the courts, and the libraries in Bedford and Mitchell. In addition, the survey was also put online so that folks could access it through social media pages. Information about the survey was presented to the community through newspaper articles, water bills, and of course, word of mouth. The survey was made up of about 50 items that focused on various topics, including demographic data like education and income levels, quality of life in the county, awareness of community resources, specifically those related to mental health and substance use, any challenges or barriers to accessing supports in the community, and the likelihood or willingness of supporting various efforts like volunteering or donating money to address the community's needs. Overall, more than 1,300 people responded to the survey, with about 2/3 of those responses being from people online. Some of the surveys, though, had to be discarded as they were completed by people from outside the county limits. But the data I'm going to provide in this presentation is based on the responses from 1,303 participants, or about 3% of the county. While this percentage may seem low, the total group of people that completed the survey were fairly representative of the adult population in the county. In addition, about 72% of the people who responded to the survey were women. This is not uncommon for this type of research, as women are oftentimes more likely to participate than men. While the majority of people who completed the survey were from Bedford, there certainly was representation from other areas and cities within the county, including Mitchell. In addition, slightly more than half worked here in the county, and about 1 in 4 people were not currently working due to being retired or having a disability or simply being unemployed. Notably, 62%, or nearly 2 out of 3 people, had a close relationship with someone who was struggling with substance use. On this slide, you will see the demographic data of those who responded to the survey compared with recent census data for Lawrence County. Although in some cases the information gathered was slightly different between the current survey and the census data, you will see that the findings are fairly similar, particularly with income, poverty rate, senior citizens, and those working in healthcare or social services. For example, while 13% of our sample was living in poverty, census data indicated that 13.7% were living in poverty in Lawrence County. On this slide, you will see several comparisons that help us to contextualize and compare our results with those at the US level. So for example, about 17.6% of those who responded to the Lawrence County survey indicated that they had a diagnosed mental illness. This is fairly comparable to the 18.3% of the total US population that has a mental illness. Further, you will see that in Lawrence County, we may actually have a higher rate of substance use compared with the national data. About 17% of those who responded to the survey had indicated that they engaged in some degree of substance use during their life. This is in comparison to the 10.2% of people aged 12 or older at the national level that indicated that they have engaged in substance use. It's important to note here, though, that we only had people aged 18 and older participate in the survey and did not include any minors. Notably, our levels of people in recovery are fairly comparable between Lawrence County and the United States, that being 9% and 10% respectively. In addition, in our survey, we asked Lawrence County residents about the use of prescription medications. And as such, 14% of people who responded to the survey indicated that they used prescription medications more often than were prescribed for them, or they used prescription medications that were not prescribed for them at all. And so when we talk about substance use, we cannot forget about prescription medications, particularly those that we might even have in our home or in our medicine cabinets. This slide presents a general overview of what people had to say about living in Lawrence County. Although a majority believed that Lawrence County was in fact a great place to live, 95% recognized that the county had a problem with substance use. Notably, less than 25% believed that the county leadership was effectively addressing the mental health and substance use issues in the community. Similarly, less than 20% believed that the county even had enough resources to do so. The challenge of mental illness and substance use is further compounded by the majority believing that people were judged for seeking help. In addition, the prevalence of substance use was great enough to lead more than 1 in 4 people to even consider leaving Lawrence County. This next section of the presentation will talk a little bit about community resources, including what folks were aware of and their attitudes towards needed treatment options. Having an awareness of the resources available in one's community is critical to help-seeking behavior. The current survey listed about 10 resources in Lawrence County that were associated specifically with some aspect of mental health or substance use. Notably, 26%, or 1 in 4 people, were only aware of 2 or fewer resources. As such, it's important for communities to consider getting the word out and about regarding what options are available for people. Things like increased advertisement and visibility of signage can increase people's awareness and potentially decrease stigma that might be attached to such services, especially when such services may be perceived as hidden or tucked away. At the time of this survey, it's important to realize that certain resources were not available in Lawrence County. 2 major resources such as Red's House, that provides transitional housing for men in recovery, and Transitions, which provides a 30-day inpatient treatment program for substance use, only came about subsequent to the survey. Now, about 80% of people who completed the survey agreed that Lawrence County needed transitional housing and an inpatient treatment facility. Likewise, similar percentages of people were comfortable with having such facilities in the county. It's important to recognize, though, that although people may see a particular need in their community, they may not be willing to actually fill that need in their community with local resources. This is often referred to as NIMBY, or not my backyard mentality. However, many residents of Lawrence County not only recognize the need, but were comfortable with having such needs addressed through local services. Further, it's important to realize that having services in one's own community can lead to better outcomes than having to travel to distant services or organizations. In addition, the survey asked people about a needle exchange program, keeping in mind that Lawrence County had a needle exchange program that was shut down in October of 2017. It's important to note that needle exchange programs or syringe services have shown to be effective in reducing the spread of bloodborne pathogens and infectious diseases like HIV and hepatitis. Further, they provide people with access to information about healthier behaviors and available treatment options. A majority of survey respondents noted that the needle exchange program could help to reduce the spread of diseases. However, 42% believed that such services could increase drug use. Notably, there were significant relationships between people's knowledge about the needle exchange programs and the perception that they increase drug use, as well as their level of comfort with having a needle exchange program in the community. More specifically, a moderately strong negative correlation was noted such that increased knowledge was related to a decreased belief that needle exchange programs were associated with increased drug use. A strong positive correlation was noted such that increased knowledge of needle exchange programs was associated with increased comfortableness with having such programs in the community. In short, having knowledge resulted in different attitudes. Notably, knowledge can be increased through trainings and education. Research in rural communities has consistently identified the many challenges people might experience, particularly when it comes to mental health and substance use treatment. Unfortunately, because rural communities are often less densely populated, fewer resources from the federal and state levels are allocated to these communities. As such, they often experience increased barriers, such as fewer treatment providers or less well-trained providers than found in more urban settings. Stigma, or negative beliefs and attitudes towards certain behaviors, qualities, or people, can be a huge barrier to people acknowledging that they have a problem and or engaging in help-seeking behavior for their needs. Unfortunately, stigma towards mental illness and substance use can be quite prevalent in rural communities. In the figure on this slide, you can see that more than 40% of people believe that stigma would be a barrier to them seeking help if they ever needed it for mental illness or substance use. Similarly, personal shame associated with mental illness or substance use was identified as a potential barrier for more than 60% of people. In addition, rural communities are generally smaller where people know people, and as such, privacy and confidentiality can be a concern when it comes to healthcare. More than 50% of survey respondents acknowledged that a lack of confidentiality would be a barrier to them seeking mental health or substance use services if they needed it. Although providers are prevented by federal regulations like HIPAA from sharing private or personal information, such regulations do not prevent community members from talking about who they see walking into a mental health agency or coming out of a treatment facility. So although it can be a strength in small communities such that everyone might know each other, this can be a weakness when it comes to people desiring privacy, especially when they worry about stigma and have a sense of shame about a particular need. In addition, respondents saw the lack of healthcare coverage or insurance as a potential barrier to accessing mental health or substance use treatment. In addition, but to a lesser degree, they also saw the lack of transportation and childcare as potential barriers. Of course, there are other potential barriers like ability to take time off from work or fear of losing one's job. And it's important for other efforts and inquiries to consider a broader array of barriers or barriers that might be community specific. Removing barriers is critical to promoting healthcare access as well as utilization. Several community leaders also wanted to gauge what citizens believed were the root cause of mental illness and substance use. As such, this was also included amid the survey items. This figure presents the percentages of what people believe to be the root of mental illness or substance use disorders. The data for mental illness is in blue, and the data for substance use is in orange. While most people believe that mental illness or substance use disorders were rooted in medical or biological causes, we also see that others believe that they were the outcome of a choice or the lack of morality or being sinful. Still others had different beliefs or saw it as a combination of factors. Most notable is the percentage of people that saw substance use disorders as a choice. While it might be a choice for someone to pick up a joint for the first time or try meth or heroin, seeing it entirely as a choice, particularly for ongoing substance use, minimizes the influence of various factors, such as peer pressure, underlying mental illness or trauma, ongoing emotion, psychological or physical pain, the lack of alternative coping strategies, one's genetic makeup, and certainly the underlying biology of addiction. In addition, it is important to acknowledge the importance of Christian ideology in the culture of Lawrence County and its influence on personal beliefs. We need to consider and respect individuals' personal beliefs and religious convictions while also helping folks to access the help and services they might need to live life more fully and become healthy contributing members of our society. In this next section of the presentation, I will be talking a little bit about education. Now, at the time of the survey, DARE was the approach that was used to address the topic of substance use with school children. However, during the interviews and meetings with community stakeholders as I was preparing for this survey, it was evident that there was an interest in understanding what citizens believed or desired regarding education on mental health and substance use among the community youth. This slide presents the data from 2 questions that ask community members about when education should be provided regarding mental health and substance use. Data for mental health, again, is reflected with blue bars, and data for substance use is reflected in the orange. Although there were some differences in opinion, more than 60% of respondents believed that students should receive an education at an age-appropriate level throughout their school experience. Here on this slide, you will see a quote that is pretty powerful. Notably, the survey primarily focused on gathering numeric or quantitative data. However, it did end with an open-ended question asking people what else they wanted us to know. Here is one quote from one person that demonstrates an awareness of the pervasive issues facing the communities across Indiana and an understanding of a partial solution to the real challenge of substance use. I lost a daughter to drugs, and this community is in desperate need of interventions like every community throughout Indiana. I feel the best programs will include prevention for our younger children. We must reach them in the schools before the age of experimentation. Once a person starts using drugs, it can be next to impossible to stop. In addition to understanding citizens' perspectives about community problems, community leaders also wanted to know about the viability of citizens' involvement in various possible responses and solutions. A majority of respondents were supportive of increased county spending, community alliances with police, increased taxes, and a willingness to donate money. It is important to note that their support was largely unrelated to income and education, thus suggesting that across the community, people recognize the need to address the challenges related to mental health and substance use, and were certainly supportive of solutions. Here's another quote from a community member that further illuminates the county's current needs. Addiction issues have grown tremendously in the last few years. An increase in crime has been seen to support the addiction. The children of those addicted are hurt in the process. This concerns me regarding what the next generation will be like if someone does not intervene. Although decisions are often made using a top-down approach in communities, doing this survey was suggestive of a more bottom-up approach. Leadership wanted to hear from the community and engage the community in the solutions. It was also indicative of the utility of university community partnerships to empower and help communities fulfill their needs, particularly when resources are tight. We know that rural areas often face unique challenges, including fiscal restraint. However, this survey and its results suggest that some of the solutions to these challenges are found within the strengths of rural communities, particularly in their sense of community. Thank you.
Dr. Keesler for that. Thank you, Dr. Keesler, for that wonderful presentation. We would also like to highlight that Dr. Keesler was instrumental in the execution of our initial R-Core planning grant. So that was the second grant that Dr. Anwar mentioned during her opening remarks. Dr. Keesler was a strong collaborator and really led our survey development that we did for that grant, building off the work that he's done here in Lawrence County, as well as supporting some of our research techniques in the IRB for the survey collection. So at this time, Dr. Keesler, are you with us today?
Sorry, yes, I am.
There you are. Hi, Dr. Keesler, how are you?
All right, and yourself?
Doing great, doing great. So we would like to open this up to questions for anyone who is on, and we'd like to be as interactive as possible. So if you have a question for Dr. Keesler, please unmute yourself and ask that question now. You can also put that in the chat window, and we'll read that here on our set as well. Also, a quick reminder that if you've not done your pre-test, you have that opportunity, as well as we do have that private question opportunity. So you can go take your pre-test at that point or do that as well. So Dr. Keesler, I know we recorded this presentation a couple, 3 weeks ago with you. Has there been any development since we talked to you, or anything new that you'd like to highlight?
Well, I think there has been some movement forward in helping folks, maybe not specifically with substance use disorders, but they may have likely had an intersection there with Families Forever collaborating with Lawrence County in creating some job skills development for people that have had histories of criminal justice backgrounds, and really getting them set up for success and being part of their, for lack of better words, their healing journey to become, successful and productive community members. And of course, there's other developments with organizations here. Again, looking forward to how we can better serve people in our community that are struggling.
Wonderful. Dr. Dr. Anwar, did you have any questions for?
I think we have one question in the chat box that says that what can the general public do to help with what you're doing? What can, she says, I personally do to help? I think it was asked by Toya. I can't read properly, but it was a question in the chat box.
Sure. I think one of the things that general community members can do is certainly participate in things like this, trainings, becoming as informed as possible, certainly participating in any surveys or assessments or research projects so that we as academics and practitioners can better understand the broader issues that the community is facing. And also to be mindful of their own approach. So being mindful of person-first language, trying to avoid stigmatizing substance use, and even working with other people that may be less informed or using language that's stigmatizing and sort of creating a division for people to help them understand, to break those barriers, to help move the community forward together. Because again, this is not just a one-person issue, it's a community-wide. And how you define community depends really on your perspective.
Thank you so much for the information. I had a question when I was going through, when you were going through your presentation, was that still there is a considerably high percentage of people who consider substance use disorder as a choice and not necessarily as a disease. I know that we have been working through Indiana Rural Opioid Consortium just to spread that information and outreach that it is a chronic disease. Is there any work that is being done in Lawrence County that you're aware of in addition to what Indiana Rural Opioid Consortium is doing regarding that?
I'm not intimately involved at the moment with anything or currently aware. I do know that some of the treatment providers have ongoing work, not only with patients or clients in their groups, but also their employees and some smaller initiatives in the community. Again, it really takes a long time to change some of, for lack of a better word, some conservative views. And really being, as we work with people to move them forward, also being respectful of cultural and religious beliefs, which are really important here in Lawrence County. So really taking a community sensitive approach.
I agree with you completely on that, especially working in rural Indiana. You have to take everybody's perspectives into consideration while providing that information. I think we have another question from Brianna, who is a peer recovery coach. And it says that how can we get these webinars out to the general public to help them better understand this battle that we are fighting? So as far as Indiana Rural Opioid Consortium is concerned, we moved these to virtual just because of COVID-19. Other than that, we try to bring all the information and education that we have to in-person events. But Dr. Keesler, is there any other way that you can think of to get this to general public?
That's something we've struggled with. I've engaged my students as a professor. I've brought my students down to the community. We've done a community education series. And really, I think what works well is keeping it as, as comfortable as possible in a neutral environment and really not just focusing on one thing, but maybe broad health issues, because this certainly is part of health and wellness for the community. The other thing too is we've done other initiatives where we've struggled and we're not quite sure why people don't attend. And it may be because of their own concerns of being associated with attending trainings and what people might think of them. Of course, in a smaller community where people know people, there's always that concern with privacy and confidentiality. And again, I think the stigma can be a huge part of it. And how do we break down those barriers? Again, change is slow. And one of the things I also try and do is to write a monthly news article in some way related to mental health and substance use disorders. To again have that sort of that drip effect in that you give people a little bit of information each time and have that information constantly flowing.
Thank you so much. I think that's a very good idea of your news article. Where does that news article get published, Dr. Keesler? Can you provide that information?
Yeah, I just work with the Times Mail, the local newspaper here for the county. And as I'm able to write them, they're able to publish them in the newspaper.
Great. So now you know where you can find Dr. Keesler's news article regarding substance use disorder and mental health. Additionally, as Dr. Keesler mentioned, stigma is a huge issue. And I think virtual offerings can actually help deal with that stigma, since when these offerings are virtual, you can log into these at any time during work, and our webinars and our events, the virtual events, will be available on the YouTube channel after they're done, so they can be accessed even after this live presentation is done. So that is one way to work around the stigma. Rural counties and rural communities usually have a lot more of this, because everybody knows everybody, and if you are even accessing a mental health for your mental health treatment, that can also result in some sort of a stigma, and trying to work around that and breaking down those barriers is what we're trying to do through these virtual events. A comment that came in from Katrina Norris was to post these on social media. Indiana Rural Health Association has done whatever we can do to broadcast these out on social media. We are on Twitter, we are on Facebook, we are also getting this information out through LinkedIn and any other avenue that we can find. We are trying to promote these events and anything else that is happening. We had one such event on the International Overdose Awareness Day on August 31st. It was a virtual event where the loved ones of the people suffering from substance use disorder shared their stories, and it is available on a YouTube channel as well. I think that's about it from the questions. Do you have any other questions, Dr. Mullen?
I also want to highlight with Dr. Keesler as well, we are sharing that help link. So if you have a question, that's being monitored after today. So if you are watching this in a recording setting, if you would like to get connected with Dr. Keesler, please feel free to fill that out. Dr. Anwar and myself, we both monitor that frequently, daily. So if there's anything we can do or any connections that you want to make, I think we are stronger together, and connections are what make the world go around. So we want to be part of the solution for each community that we are working with. Dr. Keesler, anything else you want to share or any last words before we transition to our next presentation?
Yeah, just one quick comment in that I think, yes, I think so many people are doing tremendous work, but also it would be helpful for community members to also share some of the information, the links, the videos, if they come across them, and they can share them with local Facebook groups and pages, because some people in the community may not be aware of these state level or national level organizations, et cetera, and may be more comfortable getting some of their information from local Facebook media pages. So that's just an additional thought and another way that everybody can come together. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think we got a comment for you, Dr. Keesler, from Kenny Bundy, and he's saying thank you, and for you to speak about the value of recovery advocacy in the rural community. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.